My mother always said that family comes first, Dot. What she really meant was, my son comes first. And you will sacrifice for him. I used to believe that was just the way things were, that I had to be the responsible one, the dependable one, the one who carried the weight of others' mistakes. After all, I was the oldest, the reliable one, the one who always fixed things when they went wrong, Dot. But that belief shattered the day I realized I wasn't family. I was a resource, a tool, an afterthought when it came to love and loyalty. But the first option when it came to burden and responsibility, Dot. It started, as these things often do, with a simple request. "It's just a small favor, Lily," my mother had said, her voice dripping with false reassurance. "Jake will pay it off in no time. Jake, my younger brother. The golden child. The one who never heard the word no from our mother, while I had lived under its shadow my entire life. He had dreams," she said. "Ambitions. But no credit history to make them happen, Dot. And so, with a forced smile and a signature on a bank document, I signed away my financial future. The loan was in my name. The risk was mine. And the promise? That Jake would handle it responsibly, Dot. Except he didn't. Instead, he spent the money recklessly. Luxury gadgets, vacations, a fancy car to impress his girlfriend. It was never about the business. It was never about dreams. It was about indulgence, about the thrill of spending without consequence. And when the collectors came knocking, guess whose name was on the paperwork? Not his. Mine. I begged my mother to make him take responsibility. I pleaded, reasoned, shouted. But she just sighed, as if I were the one being unreasonable. "You're his big sister," she said, with that same exasperated tone she used when I had refused to share my toys with him as a child. "It's your job to help him." And that was the moment it hit me. I wasn't her daughter. I was her safety net, Dot. For 5 years, I crawled out of the hole they had buried me in. I worked 2 jobs, skipped vacations, ate cheap meals while Jake partied without a care. Every dollar I made went to clearing the debt he had left behind, while he moved on as if it had never existed, Dot. And my mother? She never once thanked me, never once acknowledged the sacrifice. To her, this was normal. This was expected, Dot. But while they thought I was struggling, I was planning, Dot. The day finally came when Jake, in all his financial genius, had gotten himself into trouble. This time with the wrong people. His business had failed, his credit was ruined, and suddenly he needed a loan, Dot. And guess who my mother turned to? "Lily, please," she begged. "Jake needs your help again." She looked at me with the same expectant eyes, the same unwavering confidence that I would fix everything, as I always had. I smiled. "Oh, of course, Mom, but let's do it right this time." I handed her a contract, a loan in her name. I made sure the interest rates were as brutal as the ones I had been stuck with, Dot. And when she hesitated, I leaned in and whispered, "It's just a small favor. You'll pay it off in no time." I watched the realization sink in. The panic. The helplessness, Dot. For the first time, she knew what it felt like to be used. Dot, she didn't sign, Dot. And Jake? Well, he finally learned how to fend for himself, Dot. For the first time in my life, I watched as my mother had no words. She just sat there, staring at the contract as if it were a foreign object, something unnatural and offensive. Her lips parted slightly, then pressed together in a tight line. "Lily," she finally said, her voice softer now, almost pleading. This isn't fair." I laughed. Actually laughed. A sound that felt foreign to my own ears, bitter and sharp. "Not fair," I echoed. "And what was fair about what you did to me? About the years I spent drowning in debt while Jake lived like a king?" Her expression tightened, like she wanted to deny it, like she wanted to spin the same tired excuses she always had. But she couldn't. Not this time. Because now the burden was being placed on her shoulders. And suddenly it wasn't so easy to bear. Jake stood off to the side, arms crossed, a deep scowl on his face. He had always been good at pretending he was above it all, like consequences were just an inconvenience he could ignore. But now, with no escape route, no sister to bail him out, his confidence was cracking. "You know I can't take this on," Mom said finally, her voice tight. "It would ruin me." I met her gaze, unflinching. "Now you know how I felt." She tried to appeal to me one last time, the motherly act, the guilt. But I had spent years breaking free of that invisible chain, the one that had kept me bound to them, sacrificing for people who never once sacrificed for me. So I stood up, took the contract back, and smiled. "Good luck, Mom." "And good luck, Jake." Then I walked away, leaving them to deal with the mess they had created, on their own for once. The weight on my shoulders lifted the moment I stepped out of my mother's house. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying their burdens. I wasn't the one expected to clean up the mess. The air felt lighter, the city noise less grating. I had finally broken free, but freedom didn't come without consequences. Jake wasn't the type to accept responsibility, and my mother wasn't the type to let go of control. I expected the calls to start, and I was right. Within hours, my phone buzzed relentlessly, her name flashing across the screen, followed by Jake's. I let them go to voicemail. I didn't need to hear their outrage, their demands, their manipulations. Then came the messages. First, the desperate pleas. Lily, we need to talk. Please, just pick up. Then, the guilt-tripping. After everything we've done for you, this is how you treat us? And finally, the threats. You're making a mistake. Family doesn't abandon each other. That one made me laugh. Family. As if that word had ever meant the same thing to them as it did to me. I blocked their numbers. For the first time in years, I didn't have to brace myself for the next disaster they would dump on me. I didn't have to budget every penny just to clean up someone else's mistake. I was finally in control. But the thing about people like my mother and Jake, they don't just go away. They find another way in. And I was about to learn that the hard way. It started with little things. A neighbor mentioning that my mother had come by, asking questions about my work schedule. A familiar car parked down the street a little too often. My landlord casually mentioning that someone had called, inquiring about whether I was planning to renew my lease. At first, I convinced myself it was paranoia, that they were desperate but ultimately powerless. But then my bank called. There was an attempt to access your account, the representative said. It was flagged as suspicious because they didn't have the correct security answers. My stomach turned. I didn't even have to ask. I knew. Jake, I had always been careful. I had changed my passwords, locked down my credit after the last disaster, made sure there were no loose ends they could use against me. But old habits die hard, and Jake had always relied on my mother to smooth things over. When he got caught, he must have thought she could do it again. I went straight to the bank, locked everything down even tighter. Then I pulled my credit report just to be sure. No new accounts, no sudden changes. I was safe, for now. But that wasn't the end of it. The next day, I came home to find my mother waiting outside my building. Arms crossed, the same look of quiet disapproval she had worn my entire childhood. I almost turned around, walked away, but I was tired of running. "You need to leave," I said, unlocking the door. "We need to talk," she said, stepping forward as if I would let her inside. I didn't. I held my ground. "We don't, actually. I said what I needed to say." She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. "Jake is in trouble, Lily." I raised an eyebrow. "And that's my problem. Why?" She flinched just slightly, like she hadn't expected me to be so cold, like she had counted on me caving, the way I always had. "You don't understand." She tried again. "He borrowed money. From the wrong people." I felt a flicker of something. Not sympathy, not concern, just recognition. Because for the first time in his life, Jake was experiencing exactly what I had. You should have taught him better, I said. Her face twisted in frustration. You don't just stop being family, Lily. I smiled. Cold, unapologetic. Funny, that's exactly what you did to me. I stepped inside and shut the door in her face, It started with little things. A neighbor mentioning that my mother had come by, asking questions about my work schedule. A familiar car parked down the street a little too often. My landlord casually mentioning that someone had called, inquiring about whether I was planning to renew my lease. At first, I convinced myself it was paranoia, that they were desperate but ultimately powerless. But then my bank called. There was an attempt to access your account, the representative said. It was flagged as suspicious because they didn't have the correct security answers. My stomach turned. I didn't even have to ask. I knew. Jake, I had always been careful. I had changed my passwords, locked down my credit after the last disaster, made sure there were no loose ends they could use against me. But old habits die hard, and Jake had always relied on my mother to smooth things over when he got caught. He must have thought she could do it again. I went straight to the bank, locked everything down even tighter. Then I pulled my credit report just to be sure. No new accounts, no sudden changes. I was safe. For now, But that wasn't the end of it. The next day, I came home to find my mother waiting outside my building. Arms crossed. The same look of quiet disapproval she had worn my entire childhood. I almost turned around, walked away. But I was tired of running. You need to leave, I said, unlocking the door. We need to talk, she said, stepping forward as if I would let her inside. I didn't. I held my ground. We don't, actually. I said what I needed to say. She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. Jake is in trouble, Lily. I raised an eyebrow. And that's my problem, why? She flinched, just slightly. Like she hadn't expected me to be so cold, like she had counted on me caving, the way I always had. You don't understand, she tried again. He borrowed money, from the wrong people. I felt a flicker of something, not sympathy, not concern, just recognition, because for the first time in his life, Jake was experiencing exactly what I had. You should have taught him better, I said. Her face twisted in frustration. You don't just stop being family, Lily. I smiled, cold, unapologetic. Funny, that's exactly what you did to me. I stepped inside and shut the door in her face. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the crumpled paper in my hand. The name and number felt heavier than they should have, as if just holding them pulled me back into the mess I had fought so hard to escape. I shouldn't have taken it. I should have torn it up, thrown it in the trash, and gone on with my life, But I didn't. Because despite everything, a part of me needed to know just how deep Jake had sunk this time. I picked up my phone and dialed It rang twice before a voice answered. Low, calm, controlled. This is Daniel. For a moment I considered hanging up, but then I remembered the way my mother had looked. Pale, anxious, the fear just barely hidden beneath her usual arrogance. I'm calling about Jake, I said, my voice steady. A pause, then a soft chuckle. Ah, you must be his sister. Something in my stomach twisted. I didn't like that he knew who I was. He owes you money, I said, keeping my tone businesslike. How much? Another pause, then 60,000. My grip tightened on the phone. 60? I stopped myself, inhaling sharply. I shouldn't have been surprised. Of course, Jake had outdone himself this time. A failed business, impulsive spending. Of course, he had gotten himself into a hole so deep he couldn't see the way out, And yet, I couldn't stop myself from asking, how did he even get that much from you? Daniel laughed. He was very convincing. Said he had a guaranteed return. Big plans. A real entrepreneur. His voice darkened. Shame he turned out to be a liar. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. And now. Daniel's voice was smooth, Now. He pays, one way or another. I didn't ask what another meant. I already knew. And for a brief, fleeting moment, I wondered if I should care. Jake had never cared when I suffered. He had never once thought about the nights I spent awake, calculating how to stretch my paycheck far enough to cover his mistakes. He had never apologized, never even acknowledged what he had done. And yet, you know he doesn't have it, I said quietly. Not my problem, Daniel replied. He made a deal. He doesn't get to walk away just because it's inconvenient. The irony was almost laughable. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. If he doesn't pay, what happens? Silence. Then, that depends on you. I frowned. Me? You're the responsible one, aren't you? His tone was almost amused. The one who fixes things. Anger flared in my chest. I had been. Not anymore. You think I'm going to bail him out? I asked, my voice sharper now. I think, Daniel said, that you don't like unfinished business. I swallowed hard. Because he wasn't wrong. I gripped the phone tighter, my jaw clenched. Daniel wasn't just some street thug throwing around threats. His voice was too measured, too calculating. He knew exactly who I was, and that meant he had done his homework. You think I'm going to cover for him, I said, more to myself than to him. You tell me, he replied, still calm. If you weren't considering it, you wouldn't have called. I hated that he was right. For a long moment, I didn't say anything. My mind was a battlefield, warring between logic and instinct. This is not your problem, Lily. Walk away. Let Jake deal with it. But Daniel was smart. He wouldn't have wasted time talking to me if he wasn't sure I had something to offer. Why me? I asked finally. If Jake owes you $60,000, then your issue is with him, not me. You're right, Daniel said easily. And yet here we are. The implication was clear. He had no reason to reach out to me, except that he saw an opportunity. I exhaled slowly. I don't have that kind of money. Shame, he said. Because your brother. He's running out of time. There was no anger in his voice, no empty threats. Just a simple, matter-of-fact statement. My stomach twisted. What do you want? Daniel chuckled. Now we're getting somewhere. I hated him, hated the way he was so sure of himself, hated that he saw me as just another piece on the board. But most of all, I hated that he was right. Because I was getting involved. I should have hung up, should have let Jake handle his own mess. But I didn't. Because no matter how much I resented my family, I knew exactly what kind of men Daniel worked with. And I knew that when they said one way or another, they meant it. I wasn't doing this for Jake. I was doing this because I wanted to be the one who decided how this ended. Let's talk, I said, my voice steady. And just like that, I was back in the game. Daniel didn't hesitate. Meet me at Tully's diner. Midnight. Midnight. A deliberate choice. Late enough that the place would be quiet, but not so late that it would be suspicious. Somewhere public, but not too public. I clenched my jaw. Fine. Good. He hung up. I sat there, phone still in my hand, staring at the wall. Every rational part of me screamed that this was a mistake, that I was stepping back into the very role I had fought to escape. But something in me had shifted. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting. I wasn't cleaning up after them. I was walking into this on my terms. I grabbed my jacket and keys, ignoring the unease curling in my stomach. I was done being their safety net. This time, I was going to be the one pulling the strings. Tully's diner was a hole-in-the-wall place, tucked between a pawn shop and a boarded-up laundromat. The kind of place that stayed open 24/7, where truckers and night shift workers nursed cups of coffee in cracked mugs. Daniel was already there, sitting in a booth near the back, stirring sugar into his coffee with unhurried precision. He looked up as I approached, offering a polite, almost friendly smile. Lily. He gestured to the seat across from him. Have a seat. I slid into the booth, keeping my expression neutral. Up close, he wasn't what I expected. No flashy jewelry, no gaudy displays of power. Just a man in a dark button-up, sleeves rolled to his elbows. A quiet confidence in his movements. "I don't like games," I said, folding my arms. "So let's skip the small talk." His smile widened. "I respect that." I waited, Dot. He took a slow sip of his coffee before setting the cup down. "Jake's debt is his own," he said. "But you and I both know he won't pay." I said nothing, and I don't have the time or patience to chase after him. His fingers tapped against the mug. "So I'm offering you a way out." I narrowed my eyes. "A way out?" "For him," Daniel clarified. "And for you." I frowned. "I already told you. I don't have that kind of money." Daniel leaned back, studying me. "I don't need your money." Eats. That caught me off guard. "Then what do you want?" He tilted his head slightly, considering his words. "Jake made a lot of promises he couldn't keep," he said finally. "And in doing so, he put himself on the wrong side of people far less patient than me." My stomach tightened. "So why are you involved?" "Because I don't like sloppy business." His voice was smooth, unbothered. "And Jake? He's a loose end." I didn't like the sound of that Dot. Daniel sighed. "I'm not here to threaten you, Lily. If I wanted to make an example of Jake, it would have already happened." I swallowed hard. "So what's your offer?" His lips curled into a knowing smile. "You help me, and I'll wipe his debt." I stared at him. "Help you how?" Daniel leaned forward slightly, his eyes locking onto mine. "I need someone smart, someone careful, and someone with a reason to see this through." A chill ran down my spine. I had walked into this thinking I had control, Dot. But Daniel had been playing a different game all along. Dot. And somehow I had just become a part of it. I kept my expression blank. But inside, my thoughts were racing. This wasn't what I expected. I had assumed Daniel wanted money, a deal, some kind of leverage. But this? I leaned back slightly, crossing my arms. "And what exactly do you think I can do for you?" Daniel smirked, as if he had been waiting for that question. "I need someone who understands money, someone who can spot inconsistencies, find weaknesses and make things disappear before they become a problem." A slow dread settled over me. "You want me to cook your books?" He chuckled. "Nothing so dramatic, just a little oversight. Make sure certain transactions don't raise the wrong kinds of questions." I shook my head. "I don't work for criminals." Daniel's smile didn't waver. "And yet, here you are, sitting across from me, asking for a way to keep your brother breathing." I stiffened. Dot. He had me, and we both knew it. Dot's still comma. I forced myself to hold his gaze. "I don't do anything illegal." "I don't need you to." He picked up his coffee, took a slow sip. "I just need you to make sure other people don't." I exhaled sharply. He was playing with semantics, but I wasn't naive. If I took this deal, I'd be stepping into something I wouldn't easily walk away from, Dot. And yet, if I didn't, Jake would either vanish into the wind, or end up in a hospital. Or worse. I hated him. I really did. But the thought of my little brother, stupid, selfish, reckless, being dealt with by people like Daniel made my stomach turn. "I need time to think," I said finally. Daniel nodded, as if he had expected that. "Of course." He reached into his jacket and slid a business card across the table, black. "No name, just a number." "When you're ready," he said, standing. "But don't take too long." I didn't move as he walked out, disappearing into the night. I stared down at the card, my fingers brushing against the smooth surface. I had spent years clawing my way out of the wreckage Jake had left behind, Dot. And now, because of him, I was standing at the edge of a new disaster, Dot. The only difference? This time I was the one making the choice. I sat in that diner for a long time, staring at the black business card, as if it held all the answers. My coffee had gone cold, the hum of the overhead lights pressing against my skull, Dot. Daniel had left the choice in my hands. But we both knew it wasn't really a choice, Dot. If I walked away, Jake would pay the price. One way or another, Dot. If I agreed, I would be stepping into a world I had spent my whole life avoiding. Dot. No matter what, I lost Dot. By the time I left, the streets were quiet. The city wrapped in the kind of eerie stillness that only came in the dead of night. My apartment was just a few blocks away, but I took the long way home, my mind racing. I had spent years paying off Jake's last mistake. I had worked double shifts, skipped meals, given up any chance of a normal life just to clean up his mess. And now, after all that suffering, he had dragged me right back in Dot. Except this time, I wasn't going to be the one who paid for it, Dot. By the time I unlocked my front door, my decision was made. I wasn't doing this for Jake. I was doing it for me. I grabbed my phone, staring at the number on the card for only a second before dialing. Dot. It rang once, twice, then I was wondering how long you'd take. Daniel's voice was smooth, almost amused. I swallowed down the knot in my throat. I have terms, Daniel chuckled. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. I exhaled slowly, steadying myself. I don't get involved with anything violent. If I do this, it's strictly business. A pause. Then, agreed. I didn't trust him, not even a little, but I wasn't in a position to negotiate. Then I'm in, I said. Good, Daniel murmured. Welcome to the game. The line went dead. I lowered the phone, my fingers gripping it tightly. I had just made a deal with the devil, Dot, and I had no idea if I was going to make it out alive. I stood there, frozen, the phone still in my hand as the weight of my decisions settled over me. I had just stepped into a world of lies and deception, a world where the stakes weren't just high. They were life and death. I tried to convince myself that it was for the right reasons, that I was doing this for Jake, that by playing along, I would protect him from the kind of people who didn't care about anything, except the cold, hard debt. But the truth gnawed at me with each passing second. This wasn't about Jake anymore. Dot, it never had been. I was in this for me. I needed to prove to myself that I was more than just the person who cleaned up other people's messes. I was tired of being the safety net, tired of being the fixer. And maybe, just maybe, this would give me the power I had always lacked. The power to dictate my own future, Dot. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. I wasn't doing this for power. I wasn't even doing it for control. I was doing it because somehow, after all the damage Jake had caused, I still cared, Dot. The next day, I met with Daniel at his office, a small, unmarked building on the outskirts of town, surrounded by industrial warehouses and faded signage. There was nothing remarkable about it, except for the way the walls seemed to close in the moment you stepped inside. Nice place, I said, looking around. Though I felt nothing of the sort, Daniel was already sitting behind a desk, flipping through a stack of papers. I like to keep things simple. His casual tone didn't match the danger that lingered in the air. I crossed my arms, watching him for any sign of what was really going on in his head. What's the plan? He looked up, meeting my gaze with that same unreadable expression. First, we need to clean up Jake's mess. I'll be honest with you. If I could have made the problem disappear with a snap of my fingers, I would have. But this is something more delicate. I raised an eyebrow. Delicate. He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. Jake's debt isn't just money. He's crossed some lines, made some enemies who are a lot more persistent than I am, and I'm willing to bet you'd like him to make it out of this alive. I didn't answer. I was done making promises for him. Here's what we'll do, Daniel continued. You help me track down the accounts Jake's been hiding, the ones that aren't tied to his name but are still moving money. Then we make sure the right people get their cut, and we eliminate the rest. I nodded slowly, trying to keep my emotions in check. And how do you propose I do that? Simple, Daniel said. You'll use your knowledge of the business world, the systems. You'll spot the holes and exploit them. It's all just numbers, Lily. It's a game of risk management. And you're damn good at it." His words didn't feel like flattery. They felt like manipulation. "You want me to launder money." The words slipped out before I could stop them. Daniel's eyes darkened slightly, but the smile on his face never faltered. "No. I want you to do what you do best. Find solutions to problems. Think of it as financial mediation." "Right," I muttered under my breath. "And if I refuse, then we both know what will happen," he said, his voice cool and calm. "Jake will have a much harder time explaining himself, and you'll be out of options." I sat in silence, digesting his words. The finality of it all. The pressure. For a moment, I thought about walking out, about grabbing my things, leaving and never looking back. But as I glanced at Daniel's cold, calculating face, I realized I was already too deep. I didn't have an escape route. The only way out was through. "Fine," I said, my voice steady. "I'll do it. But I'm making it clear right now. I don't get involved in anything violent. If I do this, you keep your people in line." Daniel didn't seem surprised. "That's the deal, then. You'll help with the paperwork, the transactions, the numbers. We'll take care of the rest." I nodded, feeling a shiver of dread run through me. I had agreed. I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. And somehow I knew that this was just the beginning of a long, dark road. Lily stood at the edge of the crowded courtroom, her heart pounding with a mixture of triumph and an odd, hollow emptiness. Her fingers tightened around the leather strap of her purse as she watched Daniel take the stand. He was still the same, smiling, charming, with that air of confidence that made people believe he was untouchable. But today he wasn't so untouchable. Today the walls were closing in on him. Her brother, Jake, was sitting quietly in the front row, his eyes focused on the proceedings. For once he wasn't the center of attention. It was Lily's turn now. She had been playing this game for far too long, silently pulling the strings, manipulating the pieces on the board. But now, all her work, the planning, the patience, the quiet revenge, was finally coming to fruition. She had come a long way from the woman who had spent years trying to fix everyone else's mess. The courtroom fell silent as the prosecutor stood and presented the evidence. Bank records, transactions, emails, the undeniable paper trail that Lily had painstakingly uncovered. It was all there. Every lie, every illegal deal, every time Daniel and his associates had dipped their hands into something they shouldn't have. And now, it was coming back to haunt them. Lily watched as Daniel's face slowly changed from arrogance to disbelief. He tried to argue, but the more he spoke, the more his lies unraveled. She had learned long ago how to play the game. And this was the final move. In the back of her mind, she thought about her mother, who had always told her that family came first, that sacrifice was the only way to prove your love. But now, Lily realized that true family didn't demand sacrifice. It supported you, lifted you up. And today she was standing tall, free of the weight of her past. Jake looked at her, his face uncertain, a mixture of gratitude and shame in his eyes. She had done what she had promised herself she wouldn't do. She had saved him, but unlike before, she wasn't doing it out of obligation. She had done it because for once, it was her choice. The courtroom buzzed as the judge delivered the verdict. Daniel was guilty on all counts. His financial empire, built on lies, manipulation, and countless other shady dealings, had crumbled. His assets were seized, his business dissolved, and he was facing years of imprisonment for his crimes. But the worst blow wasn't the jail time. It wasn't the financial ruin. It was the public humiliation. Lily had made sure of that. She had planted the story, the one that would haunt him forever. How a respected businessman, who had once been seen as a pillar of the community, had used his charm to manipulate everyone around him. The press was relentless. His name was smeared across every newspaper, every social media feed. Daniel Kama, the man who had once been untouchable, had been brought down by the very person he had underestimated. Lily felt a rush of satisfaction, but it was short-lived. Standing in the courtroom watching Daniel's fall, she didn't feel the complete victory she had expected. The years of struggle, the emotional toll of trying to survive in a family that saw her only as a tool, had taken more from her than she was willing to admit. She didn't feel the exhilaration of revenge. What she felt was something different. Peace. It wasn't just about Jake anymore. It wasn't about proving a point or getting back at anyone. It was about her reclaiming her life. She had been the one to fix everything, but now it was time to let it go. A week later, Lily was sitting in her apartment, a glass of wine in her hand, her mind finally at ease. The chaos had settled. Jake was trying to turn his life around, though Lily knew it wouldn't be easy for him. He would always be the reckless one, the spoiled one. But at least now, he was trying. Lily had been through so much, and yet for the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe. She wasn't looking over her shoulder anymore, wasn't wondering if she was going to have to clean up another mess. She had taken control of her life in a way she never thought possible. The woman who had once bent over backward to please everyone had finally learned how to say no. But there was still something missing. She had let go of her past, but she had no idea what her future held. For the first time, she didn't feel the need to fix things. She didn't feel the obligation to save anyone. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from her mother. "I've been thinking about you. I miss you, Lily. I know I've made mistakes, but I'm your mother. I want to make things right." Lily stared at the message for a long time. She knew exactly what her mother wanted, to go back to how things had been. She wanted her to forgive, to forget all the years of manipulation and control. But Lily had moved on. She didn't need her mother's approval anymore. She didn't need anyone's approval. She set the phone down and picked up her glass of wine. It wasn't about forgiveness. It was about freedom. As she took a sip of her wine, the weight of everything that had happened settled over her. She wasn't the same person she had been when this all started. She had found her voice, and she had used it. She had taken control of her destiny, and in doing so, she had taken the first step towards something new. Lily smiled, a small, bitter smile. The phone buzzed again. Another message. But this time, she didn't even look. "I can't say I'm sorry, Mom. But you know what? I'm better off without you." She set the glass down, walked to the window, and stared out at the city, her future stretching before her, untouched, unbroken. For the first time, she was truly free.